In his book Imagined Communities, Benedict Anderson presents a comprehensive synthesis of nationalism, considering it as a global phenomenon. He defines the nation as an imagined community where people share a sense of belonging and identity despite not knowing all other members of the community. Nationalism is perceived as both limited and sovereign, and it has been likened to kinship or religion rather than ideology. Anderson challenges the notion that nations are natural or inevitable social entities. Instead, he posits that nations are cultural constructs with distinct histories emerging from the decline of monarchies and empires, as well as advancements in literary, technology, and capitalism. To understand the essence of nations and their profound influence on their citizens, Anderson highlights both the similarities among nations formed in different times and places, often resulting from imitation, and the radical differences between nations which depend on their unique historical contexts. He argues that nations, while transcending previous social and political structures, still preserve inherent structures, tendencies, and inequalities. In the introduction, Anderson presents a compelling case study of Vietnam, Cambodia, and China, three Marxist countries that engaged in conflict despite their shared ideological goals. This exemplifies the power of nationalism, which takes precedence over other political ideologies. Unlike other isms, nationalism holds an emotional sway over people, leading to profound sacrifices for their nations. The concept of the nation is so potent that the United Nations, a significant international political entity, bears its name. Anderson notes that the definitions of nation, nationality, and nationalism remain elusive and disputed, making nationalism a complex and puzzling phenomenon. According to Anderson, a nation is an imagined political community, conceived as both limited and sovereign. It is imagined because its members will likely never meet face to face, yet they envision themselves as part of a connected political community akin to a family, sharing origins, interests, and a profound sense of comradeship. Nations are perceived to have definite borders and are considered the sole legitimate authority within those borders. However, Anderson emphasizes that nations are not concrete entities but rather emotional and cultural constructs. The sacrifice made for one's country is, in essence, a sacrifice for an idea, the imagined community that binds people together. In the chapter titled Cultural Roots, Anderson explores the significant impact of nationalism in providing meaning and purpose to various aspects of human life, especially in the absence of religion's waning influence after the Enlightenment. With the decline of religion, nationalism conveniently filled the void, giving people a sense of purpose in their pursuits, service to authorities, and even in the face of death. The shift from religious to secular perspectives led to the emergence of homogeneous empty time, where history was perceived as a continuous chain of cause and effect rather than the predetermined will of God. Nationalist novels written in vernacular languages depicted communities of citizens within specific territorial boundaries, exemplifying the emerging concept of the nation. Anderson also analyzes newspapers as cultural products that construct an imagined community among their readers reinforcing nationalist sentiments. In the following chapter, The Origins of National Consciousness, Anderson delves deeper into the role of printed texts, facilitated by print capitalism, in spreading nationalism. The Protestant Reformation played a crucial role in dethroning Latin as the common scholarly and political language of Europe. With the advent of print capitalism, languages were standardized as publishers chose accessible standard dialects for their readership. These standardized dialects became prestigious versions of languages and underwent fewer changes than oral languages over time. The fourth chapter shifts focus to the early nationalist movements in the Americas, led by the elite Creole classes rather than the disenfranchised masses. The colonial elite, sharing languages with their European imperial rulers and exposed to Enlightenment philosophy, found it easier to revolt and establish democratic republics in the New World instead of replicating the European monarchies that oppressed them. Anderson attempts to explain the scale of these nationalist movements, pointing out that the British colonies were geographically clustered with integrated economies and newspaper markets, contributing to the formation of a single large country like the United States. In contrast, the Spanish colonies were more dispersed, leading to separate economies, newspaper systems, and distinct national identities in each major colonial territory, which ultimately led to multiple revolutionary movements and the emergence of separate countries. In the chapter titled Old Languages, New Models, Anderson examines the period from approximately 1820 to 1920, during which nationalist republics emerged and displaced monarchies in Europe. Language played a crucial role in this transformation. The educated classes of major European languages began seeing themselves as a community, and the growth of government bureaucracies and the rise of the bourgeoisie necessitated literacy, leading to the rapid expansion of the reading classes. Anderson introduces a new factor contributing to nationalism, what he calls piracy. Europeans were inspired by their American counterparts who had already revolted and established nations, leading them to emulate their success. In the sixth chapter, Official Imperialism and Nationalism, Anderson explores how established states and empires adopted nationalist ideas to counter populist revolutionary movements. He provides various examples of official nationalism, such as the Russian and British empires imposing their national languages on linguistic minorities, and Thailand imitating European empires' diplomatic and infrastructure strategies to avoid invasion successfully. The seventh chapter, The Last Wave, focuses on the post World War II nationalisms in Africa and Asia, where colonies rebelled against European rule. Improved technology and bureaucracy allowed natives of these colonies to participate more actively in government and visit Europe, leading them to become determined and successful revolutionaries. They adopted strategies from earlier nationalist movements and defined their nations in contrast to the specific European countries that colonized them, often using European languages. Despite similarities in their revolutionary approach, there were still variations among these new nations, such as Indonesia, which became a single nation due to the spread of a standardized language, Bahasa Indonesia, and the centralization of higher education, while territories like West Africa and Indochina, manipulated by the French, fragmented into several smaller countries. In the eighth chapter, Anderson investigates the deep attachment people feel to their nations, even to the point of making sacrifices for them. While acknowledging the association between nationalism and racism, Anderson argues that nationalism allows for the inclusion of new individuals into the nation through language learning and naturalization. On the other hand, racism perpetuates notions of eternal contamination and has historically been exploited by powerful individuals as a tool of oppression. Anderson concludes that while nationalism can be expressed using racist language, it does not inherently cause or lead to racism. Nationalism, he contends, evokes a profoundly sacrificing love akin to one's love for their family.